Welcome everyone to another glorious evening. On behalf of the Absalom Jones Episcopal Center for Racial Healing, where Dr. Catherine Meeks is our executive director and sends you her warm greetings, we welcome you. As you all know, my name is Dominique Hardy and I'm the program manager for the Center for Racial Healing. And we are here again for part 3 of an incredible conversation, Ecowomanism and environmental justice. And I don't know about you, but I have learned so much in such a compelling way throughout the last 2 sessions. And so much so, in fact, everyone, that we do have a special surprise and treat for you. That is that we are actually going to have a 4th session. Woo! It's going to be awesome. You all will be receiving an email about that. And to the comment that I just saw, yes. So session 2's recording is already uploaded on YouTube, but I did not send out the email. I'm going to do that tonight. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and give you the date for that 4th session. And then if our fabulous speakers have more to add about that, they can tell you. But it is on Thursday, June the 17th. Thursday, June 17th from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to let them share, but it is going to be different in that it is interactive. We're going to be able to see your beautiful faces. And so we're really, really excited about that. And if for any reason we have any issues with technology, which we do not foresee, we ask that you'll kindly take a deep breath, log out, and come back in. And we will resume within 5 minutes of you reconnecting. Yes, so you all should have received session 1 already via recording. Session 2 you'll receive tonight. Session 3 you will receive Monday, probably this weekend, really. And then session 4 will be Thursday, June 17th. So that's not next Thursday, but the following Thursday. So also, very important, a separate registration will be required for this 4th session. Very, very important, but no need to worry because I will be reminding you via email. And so without further ado, for the essence of time here, I would like to introduce you to one of our 2 fabulous speakers, Miss Valerie Rawls. She is the co-visionary and founder of the Ecowomanist Institute, EWI, and she's also a social entrepreneur, a new urbanist, a mass collaborator, and a co-creator. She is a marketing expert by training, and she has a career of more than 4 decades as the CEO and founder of Rawls Marketing Consultants, and so many things she has done, I may add, including being the former director of the New Georgia Project Black plus Green Agenda Environmental Justice Campaign. It's very important also that you know that she has history in eco-theology, environmental justice, obviously, social impact bonds, homelessness, and public health. She earned her BA in marketing from Illinois State University, and currently she enjoys the time that she makes for soul care, and I can also tell that she cares about us. And so without further ado, I introduce to you our incredible facilitator, Miss Valerie Rawls, and she'll introduce our other fabulous co-presenter. Thank you all.
Dominique, you are just amazing. I just love your energy on a Thursday at 7 o'clock after our crazy days. Well, first of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming back and spending time with us again. And definitely, I want to thank Dr. Meeks, who's an amazing ED and just an amazing woman who loves humanity. And I want to thank you, Dominique, for allowing us to come back and spend some more time with you. So there's another person sitting over here in this corner that I would truly not be able to do this work without. And that is my beautiful, brilliant, Black, bold, bodacious co-visionary and co-founder of the Ecowomanist Institute, Veronica Kyle. Hey, sweetie, glad to have you here. So let's kind of back up to go forward and recap where we've been. So I'm going to, and thank you for your patience if you were here last week and we had some issues with our technology. But I am going to start by sharing my screen and putting up this deck for you all to see. So can you all see it? Thumbs up. All right, so today we have talked about the eco-womanism. What is it? The framework, the theoretical. We talked about environmental justice. We talked about the framework for both of those. But tonight we're going to actually talk about, what I like to talk about, are those issues that we tackle as eco-womanists. So let's see if we can get this party started, get this deck moving. So let me tell you just a tad bit about the Ecowomanist Institute and our mission, which you can see. The mission of the Ecowomanist Institute is the inclusion, the ecological awareness, and the environmental leadership of African-American women within eco-spirituality and environmental justice narratives. We want to ensure that not only do we increase it, but we uplift those who are doing the work, those unseen heroes that we know so much about. But you'll learn about them more as well as we go along. So with that being said, let's see if this technology is going to be good to us. Now, why is it going in that direction? Okay. So the first week we talked about the introduction, as I said, of ecowomanism, the theoretical framework. And we also talked about environmental justice. Last week we talked about those impacts of environmental issues and that they're intersectional. We talked about housing, redlining. We talked about segregation in education. We talked about health disparities. We talked about food justice and food sovereignty. And we also talked about public safety. But this week, we're going to talk about how these different issues are tackled by eco-womanists. So to kind of start this narrative around that issue, I'm not going to, for some reason, Dominique, we're doing it again, but womanism, what is it? It's the social change perspective rooted in the Black woman and other women of color's everyday experiences and everyday methods of problem solving in everyday spaces, extended to problems of ending all forms of oppression for all people. That's the beauty about eco-womanism. I'm not doing a comparison. Feminists, they want to be a part of the boys club. Womanists, we want everybody to be included and to have a balance for everybody to live in a nature, live with an environment, reconcile all human life through some spiritual dimension. And this is not about a religion. This is about who are you spiritually and emotionally in the spaces that you occupy during the course of the day. So let's keep moving forward with this technology that's trying to challenge us today. Dominique, we're doing it again. I have no idea why. I'm probably just going to escape and get out of this because I can talk to this without, I have no idea why this is going on. But anyway, Dominique, if you want to share and take this down, can you do that, please?
Sure.
Because I really don't need this to do this, quite frankly. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes, no problem at all.
Appreciate you.
Sure.
So let's just go on. So let's talk about those issues that women of color, womanists have addressed as early as the 1800s. For example, right after the Civil War, the very first club that was recognized for their benevolence was just that, the Women's Benevolence Club, which actually provided clothing, shoes, and food for children and women that were rescued through the Underground Railroad. So we really start to talk about Pandora to play music. I heard something about Pandora. I don't think that was on mine yet. Launch Pandora to play music. Can you all hear that?
Yes.
I have no idea where that's coming from. None. I apologize, ladies. So let's just kind of keep talking. So benevolence has always been that first lens of how do we tackle the issues within the community. And so one of the, excuse me, one of the quotes that I love from Alice Walker's book, everything that we care about, that we love, we can save. When you love people, when you love your community, when you're concerned about your brother and your sister, you're going to do whatever you can to save them. And so when you start to ask, what are those issues that womanists tackle? Cultural, political, spiritual, all of the things that we do that we love are rooted and grounded in For Veronica and I, for sure, and I'm sure the women who have joined us tonight, it's nature. The nurturing piece of nature brings out your creativity. It helps you to have a space to create again and to think without the noise. I'm gonna bring a little bit of my eco memory to this discussion right now. I shared before my father was a child of a Mississippi sharecropper. And during the turbulent time of him growing up in the 40s, he would always steal away to nature to feel safe, to get away from the social construct of the day. And I find myself doing the exact same thing. And so some of the women that have really stepped outside of the box, and when I mention her name, you all can watch how my dear sister is going to light up. And that's Anna Julia Cooper. She has a quote that it resonates with both of us. And this is what she says. You've heard this before, but you're going to hear it in its totality. Only the Black woman can say when and where I enter in the quiet, undisrupted dignity of my womanhood without violence and without suing or using patronage. Then and there, the whole race enters with me. And that's the whole beauty of womanist engagement. It's about the whole of community. It's about us finding places where we can do the work that's going to be good for the common community, the beloved community. And so after the Civil War, as I stated before, the first organization in 1848 was the Benevolence Firm. But actually in 1896, almost 40 years later, plus later, the National Federation of African Women, Afro-American Women in 1896. That was the name of that organization. So African Americans just didn't pop up yesterday, right? Historically. The National League of Colored Women united in Washington, D.C. on July 21st. Who knew the day that I got married, this was going on back in 1896. They combined these two organizations to create the National Association of Colored Women. So when the National Association of Colored Women came together in the 1800s, how could they have 300,000 members across the country? We have access to the internet, we have television, we have radio, but in the 1800s, in the North, the South, the East, and the West, they came together to develop this organization to address religious institutions and the lack of Black women's participation, educational institutions, business, and also the political landscape. So what do we tackle? Every institution that we know as a community that we need to thrive and prosper. Our spirituality, our economic development, our knowledge, which is power, and of course, we're going to make sure that we have a seat at the table to discuss the political structure of the day. So I'm going to just take a little pause for a moment, and I'm going to let my sister speak about these issues as well, because I don't want to be the talking head for tonight, because she has a lot to share too.
Well, thanks, Valerie, and you are doing amazing. I want people to hear Valerie's reality that we are on the shoulders of herstory, not history. Okay, let's just give our sisters credit. This is why it's so important for those of us on this call this evening to go back and re-educate ourselves if we need to. Was it Lauren Hill who talked about the re-education, you know, that came from our boy back in the day, the re-education of the Negro? Well, I want to say it's the re-education of America that needs to happen, right? Because if America really re-educates itself, Valerie, Anna Julia Cooper, and the 19th century club women, and all of those who came before them, we would already know them. And I think even though I sit up straight, my back might have been even straighter, you know, in elementary school, you know, and in high school, if I had known that all these women, I mean, they told us about, you know, a little bit about Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman. And of course, they didn't even tell us all their awesome essence. So I just want to echo, it's the herstory that we need to go back and embrace, read. I am so excited that you are, name dropping, right? Dropping the names that we can claim as Black women. As an eco-womanist, it's like, I can claim that. I mean, I think we should do our t-shirt, our eco-womanist t-shirt, just put them all on there. Like, do you know these women? Talk to me if you want to know one of these women. Because when we can say that, can you imagine if our little girls and little boys could say that? So yes, thank you. Keep it going, sister. I'm loving it.
Well, and I have to admit tonight, ladies, today is just a day that has been full with so many amazing opportunities. You talk about what do we tackle. I'll give you an example. I got a call this morning about 8:30, and the woman introduced herself, and I'm working with some Black farmers here in the Black Belt to help them to get some debt relief because of some unscrupulous things that have happened with the USDA. And when she called me, she said, "Hello, this is Miss So-and-so. I live in a certain part of Southern Georgia. And God told me that when I talked to you this morning, that you're going to be an answer to the solutions. You're going to be the answer to the problems that we have, and you have a solution for us." I was talking to a woman who's an entrepreneur who had a restaurant and still has it down in South Georgia, where the Black farmers, from the pig farmers to the crowder peas to the greens to the okra to the corn, were her supply chain. She noticed that the Black farmers were being treated unfairly, and she started going to court with one every time he had to deal with the systems of oppression and trying to steal his land, which they did do. But the beauty of the call that we had this morning is, for me, being an entrepreneur, being a Black woman, to talk to a woman who was in the rural Black belt of Georgia, who decided that her economic development and her thriving household wouldn't be predicated on going to clean up somebody else's house, but through food, something she enjoyed, that she loved, that she started a business. When you ask what issues do we tackle, we as Black women have been able to stand in spaces and places that take a lot of strength, courage, and wisdom. And it's fatigue comes along. I'm not going to sit here. You see me smiling a lot. I smile because I'm so grateful to be in the company of all of you and your willingness to join us to have this conversation. But I will say that it gets heavy. It's burdensome sometimes to do this work that we do. And here in the South, I'll be honest with you, the fear of retribution is alive and well. And so we have to be very careful of how we move into spaces and culture to help other people as they do their work to uplift their beloved community where they are. So as we continue to talk about how we show up, we have shown up in the most unusual places because there is this invisible group of women that are part of the middle class. We're the Black privilege. I've mentioned that before. Veronica and I, we are Black privilege. We're blessed that we came from households with a mother and a father that believed in the beloved community. We went beyond just seeing someone ask for a cup of sugar. We were instrumental in making sure that the needs of others are being met. And so when we ask what issues do we tackle, I don't think there isn't one that has to do with making sure that everybody thrives and prospers, from health and wellness to education, to clothing, to medicine. What do you need that we, even if it's just picking something out of Miss Thelma's garden for medicinal purposes, and she makes this little concoction because her grandmother's grandmother made it, we show up. And to Sister Cooper's point, it's not based on somebody else's telling us when and where we enter. If you see a need in your community, and Alice Walker talks about the stones, just bring your little stone to the pile. We all have to bring our pieces to the altar. I don't know, I know we've come from geographical places because I heard Dominique saying hello from the various places that you joined us tonight. Look around your community. Look outside of your household. You know, you hear what's going on in the news. You see what's going on in your school systems. You see what's going on in your city council or the things that are not going on. And let's be clear, there's a move right now to eradicate history about race in this country. Here we are in 2021. And if you have that referendum anywhere in your state, please join the fight. We cannot keep acting like our history didn't exist. And every time we try to have thriving, prosperous independence of the oppressive colonizer, we just celebrated, unfortunately, commemorated, I don't want to use the word celebrate, the massacre in Tulsa, our Black Wall Street. So take the time to learn our history, not only just from the injustice that has been done, but there are myriad of opportunities of success that we have that we like to share. I'm great. I have books everywhere, so excuse me while I just been down to pick up one.
While she's getting her books, I want you to realize if you haven't watched the documentary on Tulsa, you can just also take a drive in some of the urban blighted communities, because that's a different type of massacre. It's called redlining and disinvestment. You know, it may not be fire. I mentioned this last time. We may not be going up in smoke technically, but we are surely disinvested. People are being forced to leave homes that they've had forever. And so I really want everybody on this to just realize that as an eco-womanist, we see this continuation of systemic racism. The name might change, the geographic location hasn't. Wherever Black people go, it follows. So even when she talked about the middle class, even when the middle class moved into communities in the 40s and 50s, white flight ultimately meant that there was going to be disinvestment in that community. It's for those who were on the call last time, I mentioned I'm a 4-minute walk from the Lake Michigan, in Chicago, on the South Side, in a neighborhood called South Shore. My understanding, we're the last predominantly African-American community that's on lakefront property in America. I'm not talking about smaller, I'm talking about huge inner city, urban areas, because most of the rest of it has been gentrified, right? But yet we have the lowest property value. We pay high taxes. It took us 6 years to get a new grocery store, Valerie. So to your point, the disinvestment that happened always follows race. I want everybody to hear that. It doesn't happen unless you are a certain racial group. And then it's going to happen, whether you have money or not, right? So it's probably why a lot of our very wealthy African Americans tend to end up risking being the only Black with their children in a wealthy, predominantly white community, Valerie. Because they know if they all got together, they might get a Tulsa on their hands. You see? So that's why we have to really, as eco-womanists, keep ringing the bell and bringing attention that it's not over yet just because you become successful.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, that really doesn't matter in the systemic racism, that the structure that we have in this country.
Well, we've seen it time and time again that even though your economic status might change, your Black skin does not. And so the assumption is, okay, you might have money, but you're still not like us. You might be running up and down the field and entertaining us and getting a lot of wealth, but you won't live where we live. You won't live in the spaces and places that we call ours only. I reached down to pick up a book because what we're going to be doing going forward is really making sure that you all know that there are some bad sisters out there that have done some phenomenal work. This particular book that I have, the title of this book is Black Women in America, an Historical Encyclopedia. This is an encyclopedia that Darlene Clark Hines was the editor. She's a historian and a scholar. And the reason that this book came about, that she had gotten a phone call back in, I think, 1989, around that time, maybe the late 1980s, from a woman in Indianapolis, Indiana, who asked her if she would write a historical overview of the role that Black women had played in that community. And she was somewhat taken aback by it because she said no one had ever asked her to specifically as a historian drill down to one city, one state to address what were Black women doing here. And so this was the Women's Improvement Club of Indianapolis. And the club actually started, the Black women pioneers of this, they were doing work in, are you ready for this? In 1903 to 1937, they were the pioneers on doing studies around tuberculosis. Because they knew that during the Industrial Revolution, that a lot of people who were healthy when they were leaving the South were becoming very sick when they were coming to work within the factory. So of course, that was a health issue of where they started their club and what was important to them. So let's kind of rewind. So she took on the challenge to do this historical overview of Black women in the state of Indiana. And that actually set the precedent for doing Black history studies of African-American women in Indiana University and beyond. So this particular book, which I find it just to be fascinating, it literally goes into all from alphabetized, all the things that we've done as Black women. We spend so much time talking about the injustice, but it's time for us to also celebrate the successes.
Yeah.
Because that's where we're moving towards. And that's what we want you all to do. I remember last week, and this still resonates with me, there was a text that said, "This is so sad." It's like, no, don't cry over us. You can come and work with us and be allies in the space. But don't talk about how sad it is when we know the brilliance of who we are as well. Everybody wants to talk about what we don't have, what we didn't do, what we shouldn't do, what we can't do. But what you don't know is what we really are. We are a visible, invisible giant. And if it wasn't for this visible, invisible giant, the social construct of the day, all hell would have broken loose if Black women weren't doing the work behind the scenes that we've been doing, from housing to education, to health and wellness, the politics of the day, and of course, the creativity. Y'all know you like to dance to a little bit of Aretha Franklin every now and then. And you know who Nina Simone is, and you also know who, let me throw out another one I think you want to jump and bump to. Well, let's start Diana Ross and the Supremes.
Honey and the Rock, right? Nina, Billie Holiday. I mean, these were like political, musical giants, right? I know they're celebrating the 50th anniversary of, my favorite sexy man singer, Marvin Gaye. Lord have mercy. I love me some Marvin. But our Black women were singing our songs too, socially, but also, to your point, the accomplishments. We forget that despite all of that, I mean, look at the movie Hidden Figures. It finally comes out. Who was it hidden from? Why was it hidden? Because when people start to really know who they are, they change things. They think different, Valerie. So when I hear about hidden and buried and, unearthed, it's like that's intentionality, because nobody hides, people throw away trash and then they bury treasure, right?
Yeah.
All right. So they didn't throw it away. They just buried it. Right? Buried the treasure. Because if we really knew that, we might have done some things different a long time ago. So I really hope I'd love to see women in the chat, just put a name of a Black woman that you recently heard about or you'd love to hear more about, that when you heard, you were like, oh, wow. I think they said Irene Meeks has her hand raised.
All right.
She has a Q&A.
What's that question that you have, sweetie?
Hopefully she can put it in the chat.
Put it in the chat, Irene.
Okay. And I think to Veronica's point about why is it hidden, when you know who you are, Simba, we know internally within the community, there is no way under the heaven that Black people will still be here if we didn't have our joys, our pains, our laughter, our picnics, our music, our literature, our commitment to community, from economic development to civil disobedience, disruption of the systems, because we knew that they were not based on equity. So I hope when you're thinking about the beauty of us, that you're open and receptive to the fact that the same ideals of love and joy and passion and excitement and adventure that you want to have within your family dynamics, we have it too. I happen to be on a call where I was one of 2 African-American women, probably about 10 white men, and 2 brothers from another mother. I think one was Native American and one was Latino. And the question was posed about a strategy that we're working on. And I made a point that it had to have a multi-generational engagement, particularly when you talk about folks of color, because we rely on our elders to lead us and guide us, because they had to navigate some very shark-infested waters, right? From Jim Crow, Jane Crow. And so the gentleman said to me, I don't understand why you keep putting so much emphasis on this multi-generational engagement. I said, you have grandparents, don't you? He said, yes. I said, how do you know about your history? My grandparents. I said, so what makes you think that you will devalue the relationships that we have with our grandparents and the eco memories that they share with us? I think you said you might be Sicilian. You know about Sicily. Have you ever been there? Have you? No. Oh, but your grandparents told you about it because they were immigrants who got to bring their huddled masses. Well, guess what? Our grandparents have stories of us that we need to know to make us the best that we can be too. So I'm telling you these stories and helping you to understand some of the conversations that we have about it's good for us, but it's not good for you. But what you do, which is good for us, we don't care about if it benefits you well or not in your community. Too many Black women have left their homes to go clean up somebody else's and left their children back at home to clean up. So when she comes home exhausted, that she can be able to face another day to take care of her household. So don't always, it's like the Frankie Beverly song, Joy and Pain. You know, we talked about the practice of the burden and also the beauty of eco-womanism. We showed you an image of a sister standing in a cotton field, but she also was standing there in her agency with her beauty and her dignity and her willingness to do the hard work to make sure that her family and her community are being taken care of. So, sister, you got the baton. Do your thing, because I know you got something to say.
We had some questions. People were asking about the role of the Divine Nine with Ecowomanism. Well, many of the sororities and that were founded, those sisters, AKAs, I'm an AKA too, soror. I think Marlene had that in there. Many of those women were in sororities. They were in the links. Their husbands were in the fraternity. These are the women who ultimately had the means. It goes back to what Valerie said. Many of them who started some of these organizations were educated. And that's another thing too. You know, we talk often about first generation family members who go into college. I wonder what it would happen if we were learning that we've been going to higher ed and we even created our own. So a lot of them came out of Howard. Washington, D.C. is the headquarters for the 19th century Black Women's Club women. Their headquarters is still in D.C., sister. Many of the Deltas. And what was really interesting is that their husbands often were also part of the Greek community and the Masons. And if he had money and she didn't have money, she used his money to empower the Black community and move the movement forward. And often she had money, you know, so we've always, the Divine Nine has always, you know, our history is embedded in womanism, and they cared about the environment. And a lot of them cared about the environment because their original roots were from the South, okay? We were surrounded by the environment. We lived on the land, we loved the land. And even when we started migrating north and having to get into, I think Valerie talked about some of the illnesses because of the industries, the meat packing industries, the steel mill. Most people even had early TB and black lung disease because of the tar factories and the mining that happened in the South. And it was really those women who began to open up clinics, not the men, open up clinics in the neighborhood, pulling their husbands, and then many of them were doctors in the medical field, to give out free, exams and free medicine, particularly when we were so, so discriminated against too. So thanks for that.
And Marlene, you had another question that I want to come back with. You asked about, with all the attention with Tulsa, that Tulsa's getting, is eco-womanism relevant to the situation? Well, I don't know if you saw the last living 2 women that were children. Actually, there was a third, but she died. And these women were the ones who sat in their 100+ years in front of Congress and talked about being 7 and 6 years old and still hearing the screaming all their lives. But one young sister, her mother told her, run and don't look back. It's no different than what Sarah was told. You better get on up out of Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot's wife, and said, don't look back. And she did. And unfortunately, you know what happened if you know that story, right? So yes, eco-womanism is relevant to every situation that we face as community, within community, as community members. So how is it relevant? Revitalization of community, the infrastructure, the vertical as well as the horizontal. When we talked about housing, Black women aren't just on the front line trying to get affordable housing. They're in construction. We're looking at one of them. When you talk about how is it relevant, when they're looking at what is the economic engine going to be, there will be women sitting at that table that will bring the creative class to that table, because creativity creates economic development. And people think that the creative class that we are part of is just people being creative for the sake of being creative. Behind every industry, there are accountants, there are printers, there are co-photographers. So you have these spaces that creativity and innovation will bring back to the luster of community. So it's always relevant to have women at the table, especially with Tulsa, because the voices they're hearing now are those young girls who lost their family and their community in Tulsa. So we're always relevant. Our voices are always relevant. Our eco-memory is always relevant. Our current, past, and future state as women is always relevant. I was asked to, there's another question in there?
Yes. The question is, with all the attention that Tulsa is getting, is eco-womanism relevant to this situation? Actually, I should ask, how is it relevant?
Well, that's fine. I think I was just speaking to that question that I just saw. You know, eco-womanism is relevant to everything that we do, because we look at both the natural environment, the oppressive systems within the environment, and how can we help people to navigate through those spaces. You know, we talk about we're social change agents. I mean, we literally, eco-womanists, we become the change that we want to see. So eco-womanists will never go away. Quite frankly, I'm headed into a seminary in the fall, and one of my sheroes is Dr. Katie, Reverend Geneva Dr. Cannon, and she literally brought eco-womanism or womenism into the theological construct of liberation for women and community. So I'm going to have a esteemed pleasure of being able to spend time in the Women's Leadership Development Center after her name, and dive deeper into eco-womanism as I pursue this degree.
And I wanted to thank you for that. I wanted to add, you know, when it comes to the Tulsa reality, I'm watching the interviews, right? And they're male and female interviews. Many of the women, most of the people that have been interviewed about Tulsa are women. I'm not surprised. We are the keepers of tradition. I'm not knocking the brothers. I'm not knocking men, but women. Think about who in your family, when the mama, the matriarch stops, what happens to the holidays? What happens to the celebrations, right? So I'm not surprised the oral, who spoke before Congress, 100-and-some-year-old woman, the mother, to sit there, and it was 7 years old. That was 100 years ago. Here she is now, right? Remembering this. I'm not surprised that there are women on CNN and, NBC, many of them, because we are the storytellers, we're more the story keepers, right? We keep the stories. So when I think about modern day eco-womanism and Tulsa, I want us to start thinking about, I'm going back and I want to read and hear from the women, because the fact that they are able to get us to pay attention to this now, and you got LeBron James and others' money behind the documentary, but I will bet you any money, now I don't have a lot, that there was some pillow talk, there was some conversations, right? And so I'm really, really excited that it has come to the forefront, because I want us to remember, this happened in Florida too.
Right.
I mean, this happens all the time. Women, think about it. This happened in Watts with Rodney King. They burn it up, y'all burn it up. We never gonna fix it again. Angry when King was killed, the West Side still has not recovered. So whether we light the torch or they light the torch, the bottom line is people don't really care about the destruction of our community, but very often it's women. So you got to raise your kids. You got to live there. It's women who will begin to bring it back to the forefront. So I say eco-womanism in Tulsa, we are the healers that they've been waiting for. We're not going to be able, I'm not resting. As a matter of fact, it has stirred up so much in me. And we're going to pull the brothers in and the sisters from another mother and the brothers, because, everybody, because we didn't do Tulsa. It was done to us. But I really believe that we have to keep remembering that that's just not history. I just want to end with that. This is still happening right now. It's just a different type of fire. It's a different torch, people, but it's still happening right now. When we start going good, somebody got to squash it. Let's disinvest. Let's pull things out. Let's, not put the best teachers in their schools. So I just want us to understand that Tulsa isn't just yesterday. That's today.
And I'd like to share this with you. We talk about the massacre in Tulsa that happened in 1921. Let me just run through the country and give you an idea of what this looked like. Chicago, 1919 massacre. Springfield, Illinois, 1908. East St. Louis, 1917. Detroit, 1943. New York, 1863. DC, 1919. Philadelphia, 1985 with the Moors. Don't forget about that. They bombed that community of Black believers, meant something other than what the colonizer wanted them to believe. Oh, I have one for you. Atlanta, where I am, 1906. Rosewood in Florida, 1923. So imagine in New Orleans, 1866. St. Bernard Parish, 1868. Vicksburg, Mississippi, 1874. So think about all of those opportunities for economic development. Think about all those opportunities for generational wealth. Think about all those opportunities for green spaces and brown faces to thrive and prosper. But because of the movement of economic engine, people working together collaboratively in community, it's fine for Asian brothers and sisters to work together, for the colonizer brothers and sisters to work together. Every time the Black man and woman and community decide that they want it better and they're going to do it inside and not be victimized by the outside will come in and try to take us out.
Yeah, somebody mentioned that, like the MOVE movement in Philly. It's a perfect example. The Black Panther Party, perfect example. Totally demonized for violent gangbangers, not talking about Head Start, breakfast, building homes, grocery stores, all of that. When Black men pick up guns to defend themselves, they are called thugs, right? When white men do it, they're called patriots.
Exactly.
Okay, we just saw that play out in January 6th. I'm still, y'all, I don't understand. I'm still messed up with that.
Well,
Somebody mentioned, it was a really interesting question, like how do we change this when the power structure, Valerie and Dominique, is predominantly white men? And I say it's time for us to go to their female partners.
absolutely.
Pillow talk is powerful.
All day, every day.
You know, as a woman, let's just face it, whoever's had a partner, and it's particularly a male partner, they are wired to react to certain things. And we need to start utilizing who are the women connected to these men? Why aren't we talking to them? Why aren't we saying, hey, have you thought about what your husband is doing at the State House and how this is affecting me and my children? I feel like that conversation, we're going to have to start coming out, like, who are these women, and getting to them and having these conversations. I mean, we see it played out on Hollywood, you know, the woman will go to the wealth. Look, we need to start writing some letters. Forget them. Go, who is Mrs. So-and-so? I want those women. I want to get them at the table and say, how do you look at him every day?
Well,
Knowing that
I
he's
will
doing
say
these
this
things.
is an example of
And
that.
somebody said, one more thing, somebody just put up where we spend our money. Absolutely.
Right. And the financial pinch always.
Money talks, absolutely.
But to give you an example, when you ask who are the wives or the significant others of these men, it is a known fact that Henry Ford, who was so oppressive and so abusive to his employees, it was his wife who convinced him to work with the labor union to create a more equitable distribution of wealth within that environment. He was nothing more than a slave master. He literally, I don't know if very many of you know this, during the manufacturing process early on, they had men standing with guns pointed at the workers to ensure that their productivity would not drop. That's how aggressive and abusive he was to make sure that that assembly line did not slow down. But it was his wife who told him enough already. Marlene, you coming, sister, you coming straight with no.
I don't think white women are liberated enough. You know what? But see, sometimes, you know what? Freedom has to be forced, right?
Right.
You have to be reminded of things, you know. To your point, Marlene, what did Harriet Tubman say? I would have freed a lot more if they knew they was free. It's the mentality too. So sometimes we have to get in people's head to remind them, you know what, sister, whoever you are, you on the same situation with us. He controlling you some kind of way. And usually it's with privilege, right? People don't want to risk giving up privilege. They don't want to give that up. So often you look the other way. We saw that. That's the history of, you know, the mistress doing slaves. Sometimes she seemed to have been the most brutal, but she was also trying to hold her social status, to your point.
Absolutely.
We have to somehow get as women to women, we've got to start talking about this, because this is all about 7 generations coming behind us.
Absolutely.
This is really not about me anymore. It's about my 5 grandchildren. You know, it really isn't. I hope to be around a long time, but just in case I'm not, I want to leave it better for them. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like, what woman wouldn't want to help me do that? I just want to meet her. That would tell me to my face, I don't really care about your grandchildren. Well, I don't want to meet her. I don't think she's out there, right? I don't want to have to take off my earrings. I don't know what we do.
I don't have a jar of Vaseline in my purse, so I can help you. Ladies, and I don't know if there's some gentlemen that have joined us. Please come back for that 4th edition where you can hear it on your cameras. We will not just be talking. We're going to share some music. We're going to share some visuals. We're going to share each other. This has been fun, but it's also been a little uncomfortable because I like to see who I'm talking to, and I know my sister does as well.
Yes.
So please come back June 17th. And if there are any questions, comments, or concerns that you'd like to share with Dominique prior to us showing up for that party, please feel free to do so, because we're going to have a kitchen table talk. What you've been seeing right now, you got to come to one of our kitchen table talks at the EWI host. So this will be a co-kitchen table talk with the Absalom Jones Center and the Ecowomanist Institute.
Yeah, I think come ready to talk.
Yeah.
Come and, bring your favorite beverage. I'm not going to say, whatever that is. It's dinner time, have your food, but we want to see your faces. If there's something you want to share with us, a poem, a song, we're looking for liberation songs that have been sung by women, particularly women of color, but all women who have felt a sense of oppression. But Black women, we want those songs. We would love to put them in the chat. Bring your titles next week as we're doing this little light of mine. That's right. Betty
And
Lou Haynes,
we who
anthem.
believe in freedom shall not rest.
Rest. Sweet Honey in the Rock, and we can go on and on. So please bring your songs, bring your poems, bring your book titles, because this is going to be a real gumbo yaya. Y'all know what that means? Gumbo yaya is when you get a lot of Black women at the table in a family gathering, and it's 3 or 4 conversations, but when somebody says something real juicy, everybody stops. What? And then we hear it. That's the gumbo yaya. So we're going to gumbo yaya next week. Bring your energy, invite a friend, all are welcome. This is a Zoom table. This is a virtual table, so we can have hundreds of people at the table. And I just want to thank you, Valerie and Dominique, for allowing me to be at the table. When they first started this conversation, I wasn't at the table, and it's because Valerie knew I was in another project. I'm so grateful that concluded, and it was great. EWI project on racial healing and the book discussions here that we were doing virtually, that I could join you at the table, my dear co-visionary sister.
I could not have done this without you. We get a chance, and sometimes when she's on stage, I get to just be in the audience and wave. But I knew we're at home with the Absalom Jones Center. And thank you again, Dominique.
Love, Dominique.
Thank you, Dr. Meeks.
Dr. Meeks.
If we were not in this virtual world that we've been a part of, I want you all to understand the relationship that we have with the Absalom Jones Center. Dr. Meek was gracious enough to ask the question, well, where is EWI going to be living in Atlanta or in the Southeast region? I said, well, we haven't identified where our office will be. She said, you could do it here. She graciously opened up her heart and her home for us to be able to have space at the Absalom Jones Center, which puts us right across the street from Spelman, Clark Atlanta, and Morehouse, where we know that academic excellence of our young people is taking place. So do know that this is more than just a relationship of us being presenters. We are truly sisters in the struggle, and she has been such a wonderful mentor for all of us. So for all of you who don't know her, she'll be coming to that kitchen table, and her camera will be on.
And a womanist scholar, bar none.
I mean, she is the epitome of womanist scholar.
Yes.
Scholarship.
And we want to say thank you so deeply to Ms. Kyle and Ms. Rawls. You all are phenomenal. The scholarship that you bring to us, the empathy, the power that you bring, great example. And I know that I'm not the only one who's learned such an incredible amount from these conversations. And of course, the best is yet to come for this 4th session. And I know that we have about 4 minutes left, but I just had to comment on, see if you all can comment very briefly on, I saw a comment earlier where basically someone was saying that many white women have challenges disconnecting to the privilege they have. And I just thought that was an interesting comment. I mean, my thoughts on that are that the goal is not to disconnect, but to use the privilege. But what thoughts do you all have concerning that?
Well, I just finished a series here, collaborating with another organization that I'm involved with, and we did 8-point series on racial healing and white privilege, right? And it was very clear there were many women and men, particularly women, who had never thought about it. Partly because if you're born into something, it's your reality. That's all you know. And if your world has been insular, this is, you might see something going on over there, but none of that has ever personally affected you. So I know people up close and personal that were like, I never thought I was privileged. I was just white. This is just, this is just who I am. And they weren't being funny. They actually meant that. So what you begin to do is to identify what is privilege. You know, privilege is often, sometimes just walking in a store and nobody follows you. Privilege is sometimes going to the bank, and because your friend or your husband or somebody knew the banker, you didn't have to do a credit check and you were able to get your car or your loan. That's privilege, right? You know, often privilege is who got interviewed. I could have been sitting there with a resume this long, but because I wasn't, you know, white woman, she got the job first. I mean, so, you know, we very often privilege comes to us without us really thinking about it. And that's why it's so important that we re-educate ourselves, Dominique. Because whether you think about it or not, you have it if you're white. Even if you're poor and white,
And
your
you're
skin gives you privilege. Now,
right,
there might be discrimination in class issues,
right.
but
Yeah.
just being white, we saw that at the resurrection. Those officers did not shoot white people. Do you think anybody black?
Resurrection.
Well, the insurrection, I'm sorry, not resurrection.
Insurrection.
I'm sorry, insurrection, I'm sorry. Yeah, there would have been a resurrection had it been us, right? We would have had to die and come back. There would have been blood all down the wall. So in the insurrection, we saw the inability for officers to defend themselves against their own.
Right.
I mean, psychologically just couldn't do it. Many of them died, brain damage, shock. I saw him crying today on CNN and I'm thinking, I'm just wondering how long would it have taken them to pull that gun out had those walls been clamped by people of color. So privilege, and I mean, and that to me, I saw a cross section of white class there, but I sure economic class, but I saw white privilege all day long, January 6th. The world saw it.
We even think about it this way, that I'm a part of a study group, and we went from Isabella Wilkinson's Caste, and then our second group book was The Grapes of Wrath. And even when you look at The Grapes of Wrath and they're having to go west, it was a choice. They didn't have to deal with Jim and Jane Crow hunting them down on the way. Even in their poverty of that migration west, they still had privilege. There were camps that were set up for them. They had places to eat, places to sleep. And out of that whole migration to the west, because of one white woman photographer who started taking pictures, then all of a sudden social services came to be because they could help little white women and their kids that didn't have food because their dad lost the farm. So that whole privilege thing, to her point, it's about race first, then class. But even in the class system, white folks are going to still get their needs met.
Race, class, and gender, and Black women, we carry the trilogy of oppression. We have it all. The race, class, and gender. That yoke that we carry is all of that. Marlene said, I'm so sick of I hear you, Sister Veronica, but I'm sick of teaching white folk about this. I said, like Fannie Lou Hamer, we are sick and tired of being sick and tired. I feel you, sister. And what I'm finding refreshingly, you know, it's happening a lot from these racial healing conversations. White folk are teaching each other. We saw that with Black Lives Matter. These young white people, they have a different viewpoint about this. So I really appreciate it. Dominique just let us know we up to the hour. This is why this stuff is so rich. It's because it's so real. And whether you are privileged, white, male, female on this call, or however you identify gender-wise and racially, we're all affected by it. Systemic racism.
And I want to give a shout out to Rebecca really quick before we go, because Rebecca just said, we white women have inherited privilege. But your inherited privilege, to your point, my dear, over generations, it's so easy to claim that we didn't do whatever. However, we have the benefits that have accrued over time. And see, that's where we have to stop thinking. White folks got to stop saying we didn't do anything. Oh yeah, you did. You sat back and took advantage of and lived in the privilege. Now you know generationally, you stole, killed, robbed, destroyed. You know that. So let that not just stop you from saying, okay, I didn't do anything. Well, yeah, you're receiving the benefits of the oppression of others.
Yeah, and even if it's inherited, it's like I inherit systemic racism, but that don't mean I have to keep wearing it, right?
Exactly.
I have to still unpack it, because I didn't cause it. I just was born Black. And so just by being born Black or colored back then on my birth certificate from Anniston, Alabama, one of the most racist towns in Alabama, I inherited that. So I totally appreciate, because these are the times when the conversation gets real.
Yep.
Truth telling, and it hits in a different level. And I want to say to anybody on this call, particularly if you are not of African descent and you are from European descent, that if these kind of conversations don't feel uncomfortable, then I would be concerned. They should be uncomfortable. I mean, and it's not necessarily that anybody is trying to make anyone uncomfortable, but this is a hard reality that we are facing here in America. This caste system that has been, we all have drank the Kool-Aid, either forced, voluntarily, or unknowingly. That's that inherited part, unknowingly, for all these years. And we're all basically living on stolen land, right? I mean, if you really want to talk about it, we need to have some of our indigenous native sisters.
And there's one more thing I want to acknowledge. Miss Vincent, you're absolutely right. Compensation. And when I'll be honest with you, being an entrepreneur for 35 plus, almost 40 years, thank you, Dominique, for reminding me of that. When you know your worth, you will fight for it. I have sat in too many C-suites where the question is posed, how did you get here? Hell, you called me. And since you called me, you're going to pay for it, because you need me to be a solution to your problem. I'm not here to clean up your house. I'm not here to wash your windows. I'm here to help you keep making that money that you make, but at the same time, you will not devalue my ability to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is a great space to end.
Yeah.
That was powerful. You all, we appreciate you joining us and hanging with us for a few extra minutes. And if you all have any additional questions, please keep those, hold those, because we'll be able to see you face to face virtually on Zoom in 2 weeks. And so look out for that email. I thank these phenomenal facilitators, and we hope that you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you all so much for being with us.
And we're celebrating Black womanhood next time we meet now. We're celebrating, okay?
Exactly.
So come with our celebratory people. We're lifting up those who've gone before us and those who are here now. And even if that's your mama, your auntie, your cousin, so next door, they don't have to be in the herstory books or the history books. We're celebrating Black womanhood.
Amen.
How we meet. Right, Valerie?
Hey, ditto. See you, everybody.